Pokemon has been around for almost 30 years at this point, and it's gone through a lot of changes. We started with sprites that look like this, and then now we're here. And every single year, without fail, the Pokemon nostalgia will hit you, and you'll want to go back to a simpler time, back to the streets that raised you. It's the same energy that makes you want to go back and play vanilla Minecraft for like a week straight with your friends for no reason at all.
Dude, that is the ugliest house I've ever seen.
What are you talking about?
But here's the problem with retro Pokemon. Replaying all of these games is just a handful. They're scattered across different systems, weird aspect ratios, and just a graveyard of old handhelds. So for a while now, I have been on the hunt for a modern device that can dive back and give you a good experience with these games. And something showed up these past few months that is ready to steal the crown. The AYN Thor. I have been obsessed with this thing ever since I got it, and I can't stop making videos on it, so I'm so sorry for the repetition, but there's just one more thing that we have to do before we officially declare it king. We have to run this thing through the Pokemon Gauntlet, because in theory, the AYN Thor looks better than anything else on the market for retro Pokemon. So let us test that theory together. Every mainline generation on the Thor with original hardware comparisons, diving into accuracy, performance, comfort, and how it feels to play the games that you and I both grew up with. And by the end, we'll know if this is the new standard for retro Pokemon.
And I just want to make it clear, because I don't know who's watching behind the camera or any lawyers back there, but I own all of the games that I'm talking about, okay? And I don't encourage any spooky stuff on the internet, okay?
Hi, Isaac. Have you got a second?
Yeah, what's up?
Well, I was just thinking that maybe it'd be more interesting to your viewers if you had some posters up.
I feel like it looks fine. Why does it matter?
Well, I was just thinking that maybe people are tired of looking at your face and want to look at something else. Anyway, I'll see you later, Eyes.
Big thank you to Displate for sponsoring today's video and keeping the lights on. They essentially make metal posters that just easily slot onto the wall, and they've sponsored this channel before, but this time I let my wife pick out whatever posters that she wanted.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's a bat plus Batman. We're loving the color scheme. Beware of what that's gonna look real good. This is womanly.
It's literally just a sticker. Oh my God. Oh.
She's looking real cute.
Oh. They've got millions of different designs to choose from, and they genuinely just upgrade any setup with a better aesthetic, in my opinion. You can even get a custom metal printed poster with whatever design you want to give them. Here's a QR code you can use if you want to make your setup way fancier and just get a bunch of discounts right here using the code isaacOS as well. Thank you so much to Displate for sponsoring today's video, and we can get back to the Pokemon.
As most of you know, the Thor is not my first device I've tested for all of the Pokemon games. Earlier this year, we started this whole stupid mission with the RG34XX. That thing was basically a modern Game Boy Advance clone, and for generations 1 through 3, it was unreal. Fire Red, Emerald, ROM Hacks, all of those games looked crispy. The screen was upscaled flawlessly because it had the exact same form factor and aspect ratio of the GBA, but it completely capped out once you tried to go past that. DS was a mess, 3DS was off the table, and you were essentially locked into the GBA and Game Boy era. So then we moved on to the 3DS, which has rightfully earned its insane Pokemon reputation within the community. This thing can technically play every mainline game from Gen 1 all the way up through Sun and Moon on one single device, and in terms of layout and feel, it just made sense because this is original Nintendo hardware. But I hate to say it again because so many people love the 3DS, including myself, but it's just the screens, man. They're just so bad. I always say it. The screens are super washed out with colors, and the scaling issues, especially with the DS games, are so rough for me that it never fully clicked as an ideal experience. It was the classic jack of all trades and master of none. Then came the Retroid Flip 2. This is where I thought we had it. We got the clamshell vibes, an insane OLED panel, way better performance, custom wallpapers, overlays, shaders, the whole package. This thing was so close to finding the sweet spot, but of course, for DS and 3DS, things were kind of cursed because at the end of the day, you're trying to fake a dual screen experience on a single screen. It worked, but it didn't feel cohesive enough for all of the generations. And here is where the AYN Thor has decided to show its face. Just by looking at this thing, you could tell it's about to solve all of the pain points that every other device tripped over. On paper, it checks every single box that I have for the ultimate handheld. Nostalgic form factor, well, the AYN Thor is literally modeled after the 3DS, and if you get the rainbow color, some people won't even know the difference. Good screens, well, this literally comes with not one, but 2 OLED panels, and the top one is 120 hertz. Good controls, well, AYN have a reputation within the community to create solid buttons and good feeling ergonomics, and I really don't think that the Thor is any exception. Good software experience, okay, this one is actually where things get a little bit more hands-on because it's running stock Android, which means if we want to set this thing up properly, we're going to have to get our hands dirty. Like every Android device, you have to start by picking a front end, and I decided to go with ESDE yet again on my AYN Thor. In my initial setup video, I used a DS theme inside of ESDE, but for this one, I want something full-on Pokemon. I grabbed a theme called Artbook Next, which is one of the most popular themes within ESDE, and the reason being because I can go inside of the XML file that's included and tweak a bunch of the settings. Normally there's a bunch of screenshots from random different games, but I went in and changed all of them to be a matching Pokemon game for every system that had a mainline or spin-off game released on it. This way you'll get a little bit of Pokemon as you're scrolling through the menu, and I also set up the GBA system to be the first one that you see because I just kind of adjusted the trainer sprites to all align properly here, and I love the way that this looks. Next, we're adjusting the top screen here, and what I've done is used Wallpaper Engine to throw on this super sick emerald theme that's constantly moving in the background. It's a live wallpaper. Then I went back into the XML file and adjusted the colors of the theme to match that green aesthetic so it all kind of comes together here and both screens are cohesive. You guys gotta tap into Wallpaper Engine, man. There's so many good ones. I even found this one of May like sitting on a bridge and the pixel art. It's beautiful. There's some good stuff here. Between the wallpapers and my custom ESDE Artbook Next theme, this is kind of looking a little spicy. Now, the last bit of Pokemon polish I added was with overlays. These ones only show up in Game Boy and Game Boy Advance systems, but since I mostly play Pokemon ROM hacks on my devices, I wanted to have an overlay specifically for GBA that felt nice and cozy. Typically, I use the Watomsk overlay packs that are kind of clean and minimal, but this doesn't give us that Pokemon aesthetic that we're trying to build here, so I dove into Photoshop and adjusted just one little thing. I swapped the little power LED for this CRT Pokeball to give it that final little aesthetic, and boom, we've got something that looks clean and has a subtle hint of Pokemon while playing GBA and Game Boy games. And look at the result, man. It's a nice little Pokemon handheld that doesn't scream, I'm a Pokemon fan, but it's got little subtle details here and there. All of the files and settings will be available in my Discord, so just join up and go ahead and download and try this out for yourself. Also, please say hi to me in there. We've been building this cool little community where we all just kind of nerd out about random stuff. It's been a great time. With all that done, this is no longer just a regular Android handheld. The Thor is a fully dedicated Pokemon machine, at least by my standards. The aesthetic is subtle, the nostalgia hits are very intentional, and it checks every single box that we had now on our ultimate handheld checklist, which means we are out of excuses on delaying this any longer. Let's run it through the Pokemon Gauntlet. Generations 1 and 2 are the OGs, the foundation of everything we love. Obviously, they were designed around a single Game Boy screen, so seeing them on a dual screen handheld might give you some hesitation. The Thor is running that 16:9 1080p OLED panel, so yeah, you get the bezels on the sides, but the overlays we set up earlier fill the empty space in a really clean and intentional way. I'm also running a shader to bring back some of that old school grit. For Game Boy Color, I'm using the Coco AIO 1:1 dots preset in the RetroArch folders, and if you want the full original Game Boy vibes, there's also a mono preset that gives you that textured green Game Boy original look. If I'm being honest, I would rather just play this than any of the original hardware. OLED with proper shaders just wipes the floor with like a handheld that was released in 1998. It's very similar to several other handhelds out there in the wild because it's a 1080p panel, but the Thor has a very special trick up its sleeve. And what I'm referring to is the bottom screen. If you hate bezels and want the game sitting right above your controls, you can run these generations on the lower OLED panel. I'm pretty sure it's the same panel as the Retroid Pocket Classic, which is one of the best Game Boy experiences out there. So you get all of this inside of the bottom half of your device. You'll need to stretch the image a bit and the pixels will not scale flawlessly, but the results are shockingly good. It might annoy you having an entire unused top screen, but you should look at this as just an opportunity to fry your brain. Throw YouTube, a podcast, or Minecraft parkour up there, and you'll look like a little multitasking gremlin. Playing Gens 1 and 2 Pokemon like this on a clamshell that looks like a 3DS it's so hard to wrap my head around, dude. Like, the multitasking functionality of it makes me think, like, what have we stooped to? But it is very fun. Is this the absolute best way to play Generations 1 and 2? I think you could make an argument for something like the Analog Pocket, but this gets insanely close, and if you factor in the multitasking and additional power, it should edge out the Pocket for most people unless you really love your cartridges. Jumping into Generation 3, I think this is the most important generation to consider when you're buying a handheld, and that's not because it's my favorite, but it's because I spend most of my time playing Pokemon ROM hacks, which were based off of Fire Red and Emerald. A 16:9 panel is one of the better alternatives we have to the original 3:2 GBA layout. Just like Generations 1 and 2 and basically every other generation on this list, we do get bezels on the sides, but the custom overlay we set up earlier makes it look more intentional. I'm pairing this with the Coco AIO GBA shader, and this does a great job at bringing back the texture and warmth of the original hardware to kind of round everything up here on the experience for GBA. With integer scaling on, every pixel lands exactly where it should. It will not fill the entire panel, but this screen is so big and so sharp that it doesn't really matter to me. The games are so appealing to look at, and this is right up there with any other 1080p OLED device as one of the best ways to play GBA in today's market that isn't just an identical clone. If you're not obsessed with pixel accuracy, you can ditch the overlay and stretch the image out a bit more. I swap back and forth doing this depending on like what game I'm playing, but for the most part, I just enjoy how it looks originally set up. Multitasking does still work here. You'd probably want to throw something on the bottom screen instead, but it's still an option if that's what you want to do. I'm not judging. Compared to original hardware, the Thor just smokes it unless you care purely about nostalgia. I could see an argument maybe for the 101 SP model because of the brighter screen, but that does come with some additional ghosting problems, but I could definitely see a path there. This leaves us with really just one competitor on the market, and that is the RG34XX. The 34XX wins on pure authenticity thanks to that form factor and the true 3:2 aspect ratio with no bezels, but the smaller screen is certainly a trade-off. It's hard to ignore the price of the 34XX as well. I mean, that thing is just so affordable if you're trying to get your foot in the door. The portability isn't even that much of a difference though. Whenever you close up the Thor, the size difference is not as dramatic as you would expect. The pocketability is basically the same. And when you factor in everything else the Thor can do, it ends up being the handheld I would choose in almost every scenario for GBA. So to recap, Gen 1, banger. Gen 2, banger. Gen 3, absolute banger. And at this point, the Pokemon train is about to pull into what some would consider to be the greatest generations of all time, 4 and 5. These are my favorite generations of Pokemon. I will continue to sing the praise of the DS era, man. It's just so good. And even though the Thor is a dual screen device, the experience lands us kind of somewhere in the middle. The highs are ridiculous. This is the best I have ever seen the DS Pokemon games look. Seeing Heart Gold, Soul Silver, or the Sinnoh region in full OLED with 4 times the original resolution is unreal. I'm also running an LCD shader in Melon DS I've talked about before that gives us that more DSi XL vibe, and it makes just everything pop in a way original hardware can't touch. The colors are on another level, and like at this point, I think I've probably talked about how much I love OLED panels on this channel for like way too long, but retro games on OLED panels will continue to just be like so much dopamine. In a strange way, this upgrade in screen quality is where the problems start creeping in for the Thor though. Like every generation, we are getting black bars on the screen, and you'd assume that if it didn't bother me before, then it won't bother me here, right? And that is true, but only on the top screen, because now we've got another secondary screen to worry about, and the bezels here bug the crap out of me. It's just kind of awkward looking because the top panel has bezels on the left and right, and then the bottom has bezels on the top and bottom, so the whole layout ends up feeling and looking a little bit awkward. It's clearly not awful, and yes, this is very nitpicky, but that's the whole point of this video. I think this would bother me a lot less if I had the black model of the AYN Thor, because it would fade into the background due to the OLED panels. You can stretch the screen if you want, and it does work fine, and your eyes should adjust, but it's still a compromise nonetheless. The other annoyance is the texture glitches that you get while running around in the world or regions of Pokemon. Because DS emulation is being upscaled so aggressively here, you get these faint little lines that flicker as you sprint across the region. Like I said before in my full Thor review video, it's not game breaking, and most people will tune it out, but it's a clear reminder that you're emulating and not on native hardware. And for me, that's very important. I want my emulation experience, like most people, to be as close to the original experience as possible. All of this is why I find it very tough to pit the AYN Thor against one of my Hall of Fame handhelds, the DSi XL. It gets shockingly close to recreating the real thing, and for a modern device, that's obviously a huge win, but the DSi XL is just one of those timeless pieces of hardware. 15 years later, this thing still hits. The screens are big and punchy, which makes the pixels look perfectly upscaled and chunky. The battery life is great, the speakers are solid, and everything plays the way it was meant to be played, with no bezels or scaling quirks or reminders that you're using emulation. The RGDS has also arrived at my doorstep since I started editing this video, and you know, this thing, if you've been paying attention, has a lot of problems, which is very unfortunate because oh man, it looks so good and easy on the eyes, but there's a lot to dive in here. I'll go over it in a separate video, but yeah, this is something that you might want to hold off on until we get a little bit of some more information. If you're only playing generations 4 and 5, I still think I'd go for the DSi XL, man. I mean, the authenticity is there, and then on top of that, it's still a good experience because of the timeless hardware. But I won't let that take away from how crazy it is that the Thor can give you every generation leading up to 4 and 5 and still deliver an experience that comes inches away from OG hardware. All right, this has been a lot of information, a ton of nitpicking, and it's just, there's one final generation to check out. It's the system that the Thor has literally infiltrated and cloned, the 3DS. First off, of course, I gotta mention it, the screen quality just jumps through the roof. I think this is an even bigger jump than the DSi XL comparison. The difference between the Thor and the actual 3DS is truly night and day. The aspect ratio is not identical to the original 5x3 3DS screen, which I don't even know what Nintendo was doing with a 5x3 device. That's a wild choice for sure. But the bezels on the Thor are so tiny that I actually forget it's not the same. It looks just right. The Thor is powerful enough to upscale these games to 4 times their base resolution, and that alone makes everything look like a remaster. The only catch is that not every texture scales cleanly. Some images come out a little bit blurry, which brings me to the real, true magic of this device. HD texture packs. There's not a ton of them on the Pokemon side, and you have to do like a bit more digging than for something like Zelda, but the ones that do exist work shockingly well. You install them through the Azahar emulator, and once they're loaded in, these games come alive. 4 times upscaling plus HD textures looks like an alternate universe where Nintendo made a 3DS successor instead of the Switch and then dropped full remasters of these games. It looks that good. With all this setup, I don't even think it's that fair to compare the two of these devices anymore. It is emulation, and I will not sit here and say that you're not going to run into any issues, because yes, there are going to be some weird like loading moments where you might catch a texture or two looking off, or maybe something slips up in the texture pack, but I found that this is a bit more of a seamless experience than something like the DSi XL, which has those textures riddled throughout the map. This one is more subtle, that pops in every once in a while. For the 3DS specifically, I think the trade-off here to enter into the world of emulation is worth it with how much of a visual jump we're getting. And yes, you do get those black bars on the bottom screen, and I'm kind of convinced here that the AYN Thor 2 is going to try to get all of us to take the bait by giving us an actual 4x3 screen on the bottom instead of whatever this goofy looking bottom panel is. Even with these flaws, I think it's easy to claim that for the AYN Thor, the 3DS Pokemon games are the crown jewels. It is modeled after the 3DS at the end of the day, and rightfully so. It feels like an upgrade. At the end of all this, it's pretty clear that this device is the closest thing we've gotten to a true modern Pokemon machine that destroys all of your retro favorites. And I know for a lot of you, your favorite retro Pokemon games aren't even some of the mainline ones, but are the spin-offs. And of course, if we're talking about GameCube, Wii, or even N64, the Thor is going to crush those. Pokemon XD, a fan favorite, including myself, is one of those really unique and different types of games. And although this was released on a home console, it feels right at home on a portable handheld system. Pokemon Snap, of course, another good shout, but even if you want to get into the modern world, kind of similar to Pokemon ROM Hacks, PokeMMO is a huge lane for so many different people that I've seen getting tapped into on these Android handhelds. I haven't really played any of PokeMMO. I've just got this thing set up on the Android side, which can take some time. You're going to have to watch some tutorials, but this is just really great to look at on the Thor, and just to have this option, I know for a lot of people, is huge. And, you know, we're not just getting the mainline games, but we're getting all of this extra goodness. It all requires tinkering, diving into emulation settings, installing modifications, which takes time, but I'd say that the results speak for themselves. If you only care about pure authenticity for your retro Pokemon games, then I do think a DSi XL or a new 3DS XL in good condition would be more honest. Depending on what generation is your personal comfort food or what your goals are with playing older Pokemon games, there might be a cheaper or simpler option out there that gets you a good experience and you wouldn't even have to touch Android. The Thor asks more from you in terms of setup and tweaking, which I can see turning so many people away from this device. But if you're like me and you don't mind that, and you want one device to handle all of the mainline retro Pokemon games and give you a crazy good experience, man, it's like, this is, I don't know how we're gonna beat this unless like the AYN Thor 2, like I said, comes out and gives you the 4x3 bottom panel, but this is like, are we done? I don't know if we're done. Like I said, the ESD theme I edited alongside the overlays are going to be in my Discord. If you want to go in there and yap about it or rant about it, the community's been growing, so please hop in there and just enjoy yourself. This video took me way too long to make, and I'm happy that it's almost over with, because now I can just sink into my couch and finally start Pokemon Lazarus.
A daily question on my